Hi, I'm Noam Maital, and welcome to the GovAI podcast. AI is the most powerful technology of our time, and government is still figuring out how to navigate this new frontier. Join me as we explore how artificial intelligence is transforming public service, unlocking potential efficiencies, the risks that no one's talking about, and what happens when innovation moves faster than regulation. Today, I'm thrilled to join by Mayor Gailey, Mayor of Lake Stephen, Washington. His background in law enforcement and public service, bringing hands-on problem-solving approach to city leadership. Under his tenure, Lake Stephen navigated a lot of growth while also prioritizing infrastructure investment, public safety, which he has a vast background in, and community engagement. And so as the city has evolved, the focus on ensuring smart, sustainable development, leveraging technology, which we'll talk a bit about today, and we'll talk about some of the challenges and opportunity of leading a fast-growing city and how he is thinking about AI and technology and the fit of that into governance and what the future looks like for the city of Lake Stevens. And so the other really important thing in that as well is a unique background with over 31 years in the Army Reserve as a colonel in intelligence branch. And so very curious what that brings to the table in this leadership role as well. So Mayor Gailey, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Noam. It's a pleasure to be here. It's actually my first podcast interview, so this is great.
We're excited to have that honor. So thank you for that.
You bet.
So let me just jump right in. I mean, your background in both law enforcement but military, and then stepping into this leadership role. Talk to me about what made you inspired to do that transition. It's not an obvious one, if you will.
Yeah, I think I always tell people I always have a leadership problem. I don't have to be the one making the exact changes, but I always need to be part of that leadership, build a team, form a team, and find a mission and get moving with that mission. So I've always had that problem, and that's been manifested in a military career where I've spent almost 31 years now between active duty, National Guard time, Army Reserve time, leading organizations, trying to make organizations more efficient, and trying to ensure that the soldiers always come home to their families after going down range, right? And then I couple that with a 21, almost 22 year um, career in law enforcement, where I've been a police officer, mostly just pushing a car around the city, going from call to call, and solving problems. Like that's what a patrol officer does: is gets in the community, goes to a call, realizes he goes to a call again, same call, and you realize, okay, I don't want to go to this call anymore. Let's solve a problem, and then that changes from enforcement into community problem solving activities, and so you really get honed in on how to treat people, how to listen to people, and then find solutions for problems. So take those two areas of career expertise, and then about 8 years ago, I started getting involved with politics as I wanted to make some things happen in my community. I didn't think they were moving fast enough, so of course the leadership problem comes in, and I have to be part of this solution, right? So I started real early out on the city planning commission for Lake Stevens. And that's where you learn a lot about how a city actually functions from a planning perspective. And then from there, moved into city council. And then from city council, the previous mayor decided he didn't want to run for a second term. And so I thought it's time to step up and become the mayor and lead the city. So that's kind of my evolution in there.
So, I in my previous startup, I worked closely with law enforcement, and I don't think I realized or appreciated just how much of that problem solving you really need to have. I mean, we often think about law enforcement as, okay, you get called to a case or a problem, and you show up, and you have to think about how do you diffuse the situation and safety and But really, then you realize there's a lot more of the psychology, human interaction. I saw some amazing police officers really almost turned into psychologists, right? In the moment there, solving the real issues. So it gave me a real appreciation that most of their work almost was that at the forefront to prevent the extreme situations we hear about in the news where they have to take some action there. So it's a really interesting background. And I think for the listeners here, tell us a bit about the city because it's a small city. Tell us a bit about dynamics and some of the unique opportunities and then challenges also that as a smaller city that you're running.
Yeah, so I've been mayor. I'm going my sixth year. Right when I became mayor, we um, I really when I was a police officer, I really worked towards efficiencies. Like, how can we do things more efficiently as a team and as a city where I worked at? And so one of the first things I did within the city is we went out and contracted with a contractor to bring in Lean Six Sigma procedures and policies into the city. And we've now developed that program out where we do 3 green belt trainings and a black belt training every year. We have about half of our own employees are either green belt or black belt, and then we've expanded that out. I call it the Lean Six Sigma Center of Excellence, like Stephen, right? And so we actually bring in outside into these now, other cities, other Amazon's been here, Disney's been here. And so it's really created this real cool networking opportunity of, hey, this is how we do business. How do you do business? Well, we can do it better this way or that way. And so we started that real early on, and right as I became mayor, and what's come out of that initial process is the identification of areas where we're not efficient within the city. And then so then we apply those tools, the Sigma tools, to those inefficiencies and trying to figure out, like, is this a software problem? Is this a manpower problem? Is this a procedure problem? And then work for those solutions. And a lot of what we're coming into these days with those issues is we're finding that AI has a lot of capability to create those efficiencies that we're looking for that maybe we couldn't find exact tools for in the past, but now we're like seeing those opportunities and it's getting really exciting. One of the areas that we are really, really proud of in Lake Stevens is our accreditation with American Public Works Association. So real early on, I recognized that Lake Stevens has grown from 8,000 people in 2008 to 42,000 people today, right? So super fast growth, and our government services didn't go along with that growth line, right? And so, and not that I'm a big government person, but there's certain services that your citizens expect out of you, and we weren't providing those, right?
Hmm.
Quick fixing of potholes, right? Quick fixing of this fence, efficient police service. We were doing okay, but not really well. And
Yeah.
so one of the real early tools that we grabbed onto was American Public Works Association accreditation, and that accreditation is a checklist of how you do modern day business with public works. But when you go through that, you start enacting systems. For example, ViewWorks is a GIS asset management program that our public works now uses to do work orders, to do maintenance, to know what needs to be done tomorrow, to know what needs to be done today. It starts to create the data that now we can go to the council and say, hey, look, we're providing X amount of maintenance, but we could be doing X with more people or more assets or whatever it might be. We now have the data to start
Yeah.
telling that story, and that's super important. And then the citizen facing side to it, part of that is a Citizen View app that allows citizens. My little 4-year-old does it with me when we go on walks. Hey, there's a cracked sidewalk, Dad. You need to report that. He knows what that means. And so that allows our citizens to interact with our public works really seamlessly, to pull out the phone, the signs down. It goes into a triage process, work orders created, and it just creates so much more efficiency. and culture change as well within our public works and the city as a whole.
So you're talking about AI as kind of a tool for efficiency, and I should say, I mean, efficiency has been in the public discourse the last few weeks at the top of the headlines.
Yeah.
With pretty much, I feel like there's a Doge task force popping up every state now,
Right.
every other week. And you talked about big government and efficiency. It's an interesting story because you were a city of 8,000 you mentioned, and within a few years growing, quadrupling yourself to 40,000. So do you think it was more out of necessity that you're coming to AI as an efficiency tool, or is this something you think that is going to be at the heart of every city when we look 5 years from now and start seeing different departments leveraging some of these tools?
So I don't know that it's a necessity. I think for myself, I see the future that if you're not part of that train, the AI train, and finding those efficiencies, like you're doing a disservice to not only your citizens, but you're doing a disservice to your own staff, right? I see the amount of work that some of my staff members do that I consider just nug work, right? That really should be automated and be able to be um, while they go get their cup of coffee, right? Those invoices should already be put into AP and figured out where they go and press a button and pay them, right?
Yeah.
So I when I look at AI and kind of my own personal um, journey on that is I started going to some of the smart cities conferences over the last couple of years, and I don't know that I was exactly seeing what I wanted to see. I was going to SEMA, seeing if I could find something there, or not SEMA, but CES, and seeing what I can. I'd go to SEMA because I have a Jeep and I want to go see Jeep stuff. But this was actually
That's a
CES.
good reason as well. I mean, a lot of people go to see us just to see the cool
Yeah.
exhibit booths as well. That too. So
So I started going through that process of like trying to find the technology. And it wasn't until I started seeing it at APWA conferences and even the ICMA conference that I started to see some of these solutions actually start coming around, and not only on the vendor floor, but in discussions with fellow electeds. And recently, so the last ICMA conference, I was turned on to the GovAI coalition that was going on in San Jose, and came back from that. We took like 4 or 5 people down to that conference in San Jose so that we could
mhm.
really start in that embryonic process of let's talk about AI within government and how do we use it for good and efficiency within the city.
You actually, if I remember correctly from our previous conversation, you have a task force, right? That you within the city that you put together.
So the Army side, we have to have task forces and phase lines and courses of action and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we created the task force. You know, it's funny to watch within city government those who will jump on board and those who will kind of sit on the fence, and those that are like, no, I'm cool with my pencil. I'll keep running this pencil thing, right? And so I know for me, I'm a fast guy, right? Let's go. Let's get this thing going. Let's get the right things done. But I realize I also needed to step back a little bit and let the staff kind of run that process at a good pace, not at a slow pace, but a good pace. So yes, we created in November, I want to say it was November, we created our first initial charter with AI. And mainly that charter says, hey, we're going to work on our data, because the reality of it is with any organization, if you start applying these tools and your data is not clean and efficient and marked, like you're just creating bad outcomes, right? Bad results. So we were already in that process of migrating all of our files into a SharePoint location, cleaned up, duplicates taken out, old stuff taken out. So we were already in that process, but I think that data will always be an ongoing issue for any organization. So part of that charter is to clean up that data, which is we were already doing, but we're going to continue with it. And then one of the takeaways I took away from that coalition meeting was like, how do you start? There's so many tools out there. There's so many vendors out there. And then one of my concerns I have is like bringing in so many different vendors, and do they talk, and do they work together, and are we just adding more inefficiencies with that issue? So one of the things that we decided to do, we're a Microsoft city. Everything we do is Microsoft. So we've actually bought some Copilot licenses, and we're starting that really embryonic move into AI using Copilot within the tools that they have. And that's the first charter. That charter ends in March, and then we'll create a new charter to move another 6 months forward.
So on that charter, or as you think now of these early steps of crawling and then walking, um, one huge topic that, as you know, is near and dear to my heart as we think about AI is governance, and in general thinking about the other side of it, which is AI is a different type of tool from a technology side because it exposes user behavior that could be risky. And so when you think about a software tool, oftentimes it's whether the software works or not that is the risk, and then cyber threats, which are always a risk. But it's less so someone breaking your software tool. Well, whereas if you talk about Copilot or ChatGPT, you take law enforcement. So one thing we've seen interestingly as a use case is where law enforcement, not always and not everyone, but it does happen, they're leveraging the ease of tools like ChatGPT to streamline, back office work on tickets and things of that sort. And when they do that, uploading information that may be compromising or sensitive. And so, how do you think about the approach of governance, the security, the risk, and balancing that without throttling innovation on the other side of it?
Yeah, it's funny. So right after this podcast, I was sitting down with my IT guys because I think they have us throttled down too much, right? And so we're going to have that discussion of, hey, when I look for this answer, it tells me I can't find the answer. Well, how come you can't find the answer when I think you should be able to find the answer? And it's because they have some things. My IT guys are great, right? IT guys are always interesting, but they always think the Chinese are going to be there, and they will be there, right? So so you're exactly right. Like, how do you find that balance of your data that's internal and wanting to access other data, right, to enhance your data without spilling your PII and your internal protected data? I think it'll be an ongoing discussion within AI. And it is ongoing. What the solution is, I don't know, but I think that it's one that we'll continually talk about and try to find solutions to. One of the concerns I have is within IT folks is, well, not everything is true that AI tells you. Well, that's true. That's why we still have a human component to to think you're going to ask AI or Copilot or whatever your engine is, hey, create this document for me, and it's going to be 100% correct. That's not correct. It might get you to an 80% solution or 70% solution, but now that's why you're trained at that point to go in and realize, okay, it told me something really weird there. I should probably fix that. Right. So that still has that human element into it. It's not, I don't think it's ever going to go away.
I think we're not yet at a phase where AI is fully replacing humans. I think, like you said, you still need the human in the loop and that expertise. And on that front of governance and thinking about how you put the guardrails up, it is a really thin balance because you don't want to throttle innovation, just block things on one hand.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there's real risk. And I think what's going to start happening is without proper education, you're going to see more misuse of tools. And then within that, there's, like you said, there's a lot of different categories there. So hallucination is one, which you described, where it just makes stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some other more serious ones around PII, personal information, things around data bias that are built in. And one of the things that I think the tech community is working on is bringing more transparency upfront from the systems. But that's only one piece of it. And so the second piece I want to ask you about, which kind of leads into the adoption front as well, is the education of the workforce and upskilling. So I mean, we talked, AI has been a buzzword for, I don't know, over 20 years already at this point, maybe longer. But really, these generative AI tools like Copilot, ChatGPT, and the likes are the last few years. And it's a whole new way of working. I don't know about you, but for me, I have ChatGPT open on the side of my second screen, and almost anything text oriented, I use it with as kind of a balance back and forth.
Yeah.
And like you say, I always, for me, it's a process where I take the content, improve it before I send it out, review it. But how do you think about that process of taking a workforce that is not used to working in that way today with AI tools? And then if you think a few years forward, how do we get to a point where that is embedded in how they do things?
How they do business, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great question, right? Like there's an intrepidated fear about starting, right? But once you start, like you almost get hooked. So we'll do an AI work group every 2 weeks, I think is what we're doing right now. And people are coming in with, hey, I did this, and this was the result. And now you can start seeing other little hamsters running in people's minds, like, oh, I could do that with this. And so I think we all want to like Burger King, like we want it right now, but it's just not going to happen right now, right? But I think that as people start using tools and moving in the accepted tools that we've given them, they will start branching out and becoming better and better at what they're doing. I'll give you a cool example. I did this last week. I was in Olympia. The week before, I was doing some work in my lobbyist called. I wrote this bill on unlawful possession of firearms, and there was another bill that came out similar to it. And he's like, "Hey, do you know anything about this bill?" I go, "No." I go, "Send it to me." So I threw that bill into my Chat GPT thread with the bill that I used ChatGPT to write the original bill, right? So I threw that one into that thread and I said, "Hey, show me the differences in this bill," and it showed them, right? Show me the similarities, and it showed them, right? And then I said, "Hey, give me amendments to this bill to make them look the same." And all while I'm on the phone with my lobbyist, and I said, "Hey, Trevor, check your email. There you go. That's what you need. 3 minutes, dude." Like, but when you start showing those sorts of use cases to your staff, then they can start realizing, hey, I can use that to save time with this. Like for me to do what I did in that 3 minutes, that would have been a couple hours, right?
And you would have to have, which in your case you do, but it could only be someone with expertise in that subject matter. Now you can open up to someone who may be less experienced, but can start at their starting point. I'll give you a good example from my world where I have a lot of contracts I get to review, both employment as a manager, but also obviously commercial agreements. And often I want to draft a subsection differently about IP or something like that. I used to have to wait to send it to the legal team. They'll write something. I disagree with it. They'll write something else, back and forth. I can just go into a foundational model tool. I will give it a ton of contracts as example, best in class, and say, based on this best in class, I want you to help me draft a really strong IP wording for this section that fits for Darwin. And then I'll send that to them and say, hey, review and tell me where there's mistakes here, right? For my legal team. Like, make
Yeah.
sure this is okay. But that saved me both a ton of time, something I wouldn't be able to do because I'm not a lawyer, but then also saves me money, real money as well, right? Because all the lawyers bill by the hour. So
Yeah.
it's real world implications.
So something that I was thinking the other day is the amount of institutional thought that we lose as organizations without AI. And I'll give you for an example. I was sitting on this briefing a couple weeks ago, and I was listening to all these super smart people talk about this subject. And you have people who've been sitting in these roles for 10, 20 years, civilians, right? And then you have like these military folks who are coming in for 2 or 3 year stints. And you have all this institutional knowledge, And this incident occurred, and the military guy who's only there for 2 or 3 years asked, "Hey, have we seen that before?" Right? And so your civilian guys who've been there forever, they're like, "Oh no, I don't think we have seen that before." But I've only been here for 5 years. Well, so what I was thinking was like, man, how powerful would it be that if every single one of those briefings for the last 20 years was in a database
Yeah.
and you could immediately access, oh no, that did happen 15 years ago, right? But the problem with doing that on the government side is, especially in city government, is public disclosure requests. If you recorded and transcribed every single meeting,
Then everything is, you could
then every
publish disclosure requests for
which
everything.
which which isn't bad, right? Like I'm not hiding anything in government, but then it becomes such a mountain of, well, we know you
Bec-
probably said something about that at some point. So we
yeah, it
put,
becomes onerous just for that task alone, and
yeah,
cumbersome.
yeah,
Which is a really good segue. One more thing I want to cover before we give you time back. In this podcast, we say we're covering not just the good stuff and the success stories, but also some of the challenges. And there's a few angles to that. One of them that I'm very curious your take on is something I've been mindful of, which is I've become more reliant on AI, definitely for writing. And
yeah.
so am I losing my writing skill? Am I losing my ability to start a sentence? Because I use it to build the 80%, right? The B plus story, and then I take it to the A plus. So how do you think about that part of the reliance that it's becoming a crutch for us?
I think about this all the time on a lot of levels. I am. I've got two batches of kids. My second batch of kids are little dudes, right? 4 and 3. And I think in a world of AI, what do they really need to learn? Do they need to learn, uh, a title sentence, a thesis sentence, and then structuring 5 paragraphs to support that thesis sentence? Because that's something they really need to learn. Yeah, I think that they do need to learn that from a critical thinking perspective. But can AI build that for them immediately by letting them um, you know, audibly talk about their thoughts and what they're doing, and then let AI build an 80% solution for them? So it's a great question because like you, I'm the same way. I don't write much anymore. I will throw my thoughts into Copilot or ChatGPT, or I actually use like a Grok lately, but um, and then it spits me out a pretty dang good solution,
Yeah.
and I didn't write any of it, and I don't
Well,
think that's bad.
it's an interesting question. I'll tell you, the way I think about it is our entire education system will have to change from a place where we strive for knowledge to a place of striving for curiosity and question asking. So when I was in school, when I had an exam, I was tested on whether I knew the knowledge, whether I knew the information on history or whatever the topic was, not whether I could ask the right question to get to the answer. And when you think about AI tools today, the best results you'll get is when you prompt the best questions. And so I think I think right now we have an education system, an entire mindset of a generation that's taught to learn knowledge and information and process it, where information has become kind of a commodity. And so I'm curious what we'll do in the next kind of few years around that to transform.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I find I find in my prompts that my first prompt is never the right prompt, and then I learn, okay, oh, maybe that's not what I was asking. I needed to ask this, and then you really get refined down to what you really maybe you didn't know you really wanted to know about that subject, because it gives you just so much good detail on stuff you maybe weren't even thinking about.
Yeah, yeah, it's a whole learning process there. So let me finish on this. If you're going to look above the horizon, I don't know, whether it's 10, 15 years from now, I'm curious kind of where you think we'll see AI in the public sector side in terms of its evolution. And then also maybe if there's something that you think that we should be considering that maybe others aren't thinking about today as it relates to some of the consequences or opportunities around AI that isn't at the forefront right now?
Yeah, I think the thing that is kind of in the background that really is the power of AI is the data side, right? Like there's a lot of really cool tools out there, but if we're applying tools to bad data, then it it just doesn't work. So I think that it's kind of funny. So I sit on the Association of Washington Cities board of directors, and I have fellow mayors pinging me all the time because they know I talk AI. I'm probably way too much, and they're like, "Okay, we're starting. Where should I start?" And I always tell them data. Your first step is always data. So I think as we go into the future, right? Like, how do we make sure that we have our current data and it's good and clean, but what do we need to collect in the future as a city to be more service oriented, like, and when I think of AI within a city, I think of it two aspects. One, the staff efficiency tool level, but also the citizen facing tool level. Like, what do my citizens want to know, not only about their city government but really about themselves and in their community, and how do they want to access it, right? Do they want to access it
Mm-hmm.
with little links on a website, or do they want to access it with an avatar that answers their question, right? So I think that's kind of the future, but it all centers around data, I think, and not only what you currently have, but what's the data we're not asking for right now that we're going to ask for in 10 years?
Yeah, and I think that's what these models are still hungry for data, right? And so that's going to continue to be the case as well. Um, well, I want to, on that note, I want to thank you, Mayor, for joining us today. Great conversation, get your perspective. And it sounds like in 10 years, your city is probably going to be at the forefront of AI, not the one tailing behind.
Let's hope, when it comes to data, let's hope we brought all the cities along with us, because it's about sharing all that data that everybody has to come out with a better outcome.
Yeah, agreed. So thank you for joining us today, and look forward to continued conversations.
It was great, Noam. Appreciate the invite.
That's it for this episode of the GovAI podcast. AI is reshaping governance in real time, and as we've seen, the path forward is filled with both promise and complexity. But conversations like this, open, challenging, forward-thinking, are how we shape a smarter, more responsible future. The GovAI podcast is produced by Poldu. Our editor is Maital, with production assistance from Shani Roth and Shaked Dro. We'll be back in 2 weeks to tackle more challenges and explore creative solutions at the intersection of AI and the public sector. Until then, stay curious, stay critical, and never forget that even the sharpest tools mean nothing without the hand that wields them.